Alright, and hello everybody, I'm the Super27 and welcome to another Dokkan battle video. This is going to be just a little bit of a shorter upload here. It was requested in my comment section that I kind of go over these two banners and tell you guys which one I would recommend summoning on. So usually with these banners, when you summon on them, it's to do one of two things. Primarily it's to pick up characters that you just don't have. It doesn't necessarily matter if they are powerful or if they are meta relevant, because let's be real, most of the time they're not. Potentially there are like relevant EZAs on here or characters who could EZA in the nearby future that would be nice to be picked up, and that would be the second reason to do so, is if you're expecting like this or that character to EZA during this celebration or an upcoming celebration because they haven't EZA'd yet, or they just recently EZA'd and you can get some value out of them there. Or, again, the primary reason to do it is, like, let's say you don't have S-tier Gogeta from the first year. He is featured, I don't know on which one of these banners, but if that's just a character you do not have, that could add up to your, the power level of your box, you know, just getting more unique named characters, more characters to link level, adding to your collection. At the end of the day, this is a collection game. There's thousands of units in the game at this point. I would argue, I don't actually know if there's more Dokkan units than Pokemon, but there probably is. So, you know, at the end of the day, you can also have like the collection part of this game, which a lot of people do enjoy, myself included. So let's go ahead and look at these two banners. We're going to delve into the Junior one first. So, I'm going into this video assuming you're wanting specifically power level instead of picking up units that you don't have. So which one of these has like the most bang for your buck in terms of units who could EZA, have recently EZA'd, or just their base kit is still runnable in today's meta. So this is the Junior banner that we're going to be looking at first. And let's see here. These are all the featured units. And again, this banner has so many featured units. So we're going to have a lot of different things that we can talk about here. So, Trunks. Now, I have this Trunks in my box. I haven't Dokkan Awakened him, and I don't really know how well he performs. I kind of like what he's doing. I just don't like his restrictions where you have to have 3 other Android/Cell Saga category allies on your team. And the issue is right now, Android/Cell Saga isn't particularly very good. Like, you do have LR Future Gohan, Int Future Gohan, this unit, and I guess Extreme Super Saiyan Vegeta? I guess that could be a team build that you could run, and you could run that on the brand new Super Saiyan Trio's team. Like, I know Truth recently made a video about it, and that was a funny video. That was a rough video to watch for him because there were a lot of struggles in the video, but that was a pretty funny video. If you haven't checked that one out, definitely go check that out. But this unit definitely has some usage, and some viability, especially if Android/Cell Saga gets more buffs going into the future. But as it stands right now, this is probably one of these units who's in a little bit of a rougher spot. Hellfighter 17, I would just say is dead. They were dead on arrival. Even if they get a really good leader during part 2, I don't particularly see them being saved, which is so bizarre because they perform much better against superclass enemies as opposed to extreme class enemies, but their transformed state just wasn't enough. So this is a unit who I would probably say is a loss. But Junior can still certainly be very, very good, especially if you're a brand new player into the game. But Junior is pretty much good up until this year's level of content where he's no longer able to tank. But he was like the perfect slot 2 last year where he would be able to eat any super post super. He has 2 incredibly powerful abilities, one being his active skill, which is the massive AoE attack break. This is also one of the best World Tournament characters in the game, so if you don't have like a good World Tournament setup, because grinding World Tournament nowadays actually has a lot of value. You do get a lot of like really good units. You get a lot of really good supplies that you can use to buff up all your other units. So I would actually highly recommend Junior just for this. And he does also have the giant transformation if you enter a turn from turn 3 onward below 40% HP. I think it's his condition. Because giant transformations, they really are so broken in this game. His is a little bit worse than like Orange Piccolo's or like LR Robrianne, for example, because you can't control when you go into it, but you always get it when you need it, if that makes sense. Because if you enter an attack and turn below 40% HP, you're already in a very bad spot, so wasting the enemy's abilities, whether it be heals, AoEs, or supers, you could probably still get some usage out of that. I would actually kind of be interested to see how could Junior perform in some recent content. I might actually do a video testing that out. Because right now I'm doing just like a bunch of showcases. The next one I'm going to be doing, which was also recommended in the comments, this is going to be a rough video. It's LR Physical Super Saiyan 2 Vegeta from the Buu Saga that was recommended. So we'll do a long video for that sometime in the nearby future. Yamcha still has an incredible amount of value. He's a fantastic leader. And now that we know that his defensive buffs actually stack instead of being two separate procs, he can still be one of the most impressive dodging units in the game, as well as he just does have like one of the best active skills in the game, where it's like unconditional as long as you have a full, like if you're running a full team on his leader skill, you can pop the Spirit Ball at any given time. It does decent amount of damage. It gives him guaranteed hits unless like Tech NUI's domain is up. But this is very fine. I would say you could run Yamcha. He is like the most dodge or die units of all dodge or die units, but you can certainly get some value out of Yamcha. God Goku is, I would say that I'm starting to turn on him quite a bit. He's a very orb-hungry character. You have to give him 6 orbs for him to be at his maximum potential. At this point, he is a floater, but if you're floating him, you're missing a stack, so you're not giving him like very impressive offensive or defensive tanking abilities. And if he doesn't dodge, more likely than not, you are just dead. I would say he probably does get buffed by the trio as well, however. He is actually on the 200% because of Super Saiyans. And the trio creates physical orbs, this guy creates physical orbs, so it should, in theory, be very easy to give them both the orbs that they are needed. But since they're both creating orbs, I could see an issue where you have the trio in slot 1, God Goku in slot 3, they both create the rainbow, the physical orbs, excuse me. And then by the time you get to God Goku, like, I feel like the trio will probably collect like 16 physical orbs in slot 1, and then by the time you get to God Goku, there's not going to be that many left on the board that you're going to be able to get him, so that could be a little bit of an issue for him. Again, I haven't tested it out myself, but I don't see the extra 154% damage support really helping him, just because his stats are naturally a little bit lower, and just having guard and dodge as your two defensive mechanics, I think if he gets caught by even normals, he'll be taking a lot of damage at this point. The RF Blues, they're a fraud. Gamma 1 is still very relevant in today's meta. You could still certainly run him. He's not like the god slot 1 that he was last year, but when you have him on superheroes, just being flooded by support or team protection abilities, like he links up very well with the LR Gammas if you're a fan of them. He is also on special pose, so if you want to run like Topo's team, that buffs up Topo's team. If you have the LR Ginyu Force, that's extra support that you're just giving to him. Gamma 1 could still be a very effective unit here in today's meta. Sorry, I had to take a quick sip of my beverage. Pan, I would say, is dead, and I don't really see her easying anytime soon, because she's a 2022 release, right? I'm having to keep a lot of these in mind. I can't pull up her card art. Alright, hold on. I believe these are all 2022 units, but I do just want to double check that real quick. Alright, it actually did pull up. It was just very, very laggy. But let's see, when did you release? Yeah, this is an October 2022 release. I mean, technically all these characters could theoretically, like all of these, could theoretically EZA this upcoming year. I guess that is possible, because once the 7-year LR is EZA, and I guess what the 7-year LR EZA, if you EZA'd, you would be pretty good. But as it stands right now, she just gets caught. She only has 50% damage reduction before attacking. She doesn't really get any sort of like good defensive mechanic afterwards. So if there's a bunch of attacks in slot 1, I mean 50% damage reduction at this point, you really can't even do anything with that. Like, we've seen plenty of other characters who have higher levels of damage reduction and just naturally higher stats with just 50% damage reduction getting caught before they super, and she's actually weaker defensively after she supers as opposed to before. So I'm not a huge fan of her, but like, I guess she could EZA sometime this upcoming year, so maybe you could get some value out of that. Transforming Cell, I mean, again, with an EZA potentially next year, he could be good. He does have a very, like, solid kit. He stacks in his first 2 base forms, and then once you're into Perfect Cell, you're actually very competitive. He also has a Giant Transformation, except it's a very weak Giant Transformation. It's only for 1 turn. I wouldn't really say he's too good, because he has a weird, like, wonky link set. He doesn't link very well with a lot of other villains, or, like, superclass alternatives. And again, Android/Cell Saga, it is just in such like a weak position right now. I would say that this is probably a loss. This right here, this Goku, is one of my favorite units that has ever been released in this game, just period. I think he's a lot of fun, and he is coming up on an EZA. This is a 2021 unit, the end of 2021, so potentially we could see him EZA either sometime at the end of this year or sometime mid-next year. He has an extremely powerful kit. He has stuns built into his passive. He has a lot of additionals built into his passive. He does a lot of damage. He has a generic sand link set, so he links very well with a lot of characters. You give him this guy just a stat buff and then a full dodge build and hit a potential system, because that's the only thing he does not do. I guess he doesn't have a defensive mechanic either. So, I mean, if they gave this guy guard on top of everything else that he's doing and a stat buff, I feel like this is actually an extremely competitive unit. This Trunks right here, this is one who was just kind of screwed over by the time that he came out. At the time, he absolutely destroyed like the God event, Super Battle Road, Legendary Goku event, all of this stuff. But then we immediately went into like the, what's it called, the Red Zone meta, but if the website will stop being laggy here for a second, his transform state is actually a little bit more interesting in today's meta. So his base form was like very, very solid, but then once you transformed into Super Saiyan Trunks, if it'll let me pull him up, here we go. Super Saiyan Trunks was a little bit weird because he had all these abilities where you're able to get better if you're able to debuff or stun the enemy, which at the time there was no fight where deep into it you were able to stun, seal, or debuff. Now in today's meta, there are so many bosses that you are able to debuff, or you are able to seal, or you are able to stun them, just because of how hard they hit. So this would actually be a very interesting unit with an EZA, which again could come at the end of this year or sometime in the middle of next year. He will be very, very competitive with those extra buffs. So I would actually keep your eyes peeled on AGL Trunks. He could potentially be a very, very solid unit very, very soon. Super Vegeta, I'm not a fan of him. He EZA'd this year. I think he was incredibly mid on release. I don't think he's like much better now. He just has guard for 5 turns and he does pretty good damage, I guess. But his tanking just isn't there. I mean, it's even by like slot 2 standards, I wouldn't say his tanking is very, very good. You can obviously juice him up very, very high. If you look on Twitter, you can see this guy launching like triple 27 million super attack stats, which is like obviously very, very good. But most of the time, I feel like you're having to go out of your way to make this guy look that good. Outside of his first 5 turns, like I guess in short events, he could potentially be very, very good. But in like short events, I feel like if the event is short enough that you're able to get to like that impressive of an attack stat, they just have naturally higher attack stats, the enemy, or their supers are just naturally that much higher. So I don't know. I don't think that he performed incredibly well by any means anymore. I would say that this is a loss. This is a unit with an EZA who will actually be very, very good. Not a lot to say about them. They just stack defense in their base form. You transform, you get a very substantial amount of healing. And then like once they're Kefla, you do like some decent damage. She's on a lot of different categories, so I would say that again with an EZA, this would actually be a pretty good pickup. Same thing goes for this guy. On release, like him and the Vegeta were like some of the best units in the game. This was Golden Week 2021. They are still very impressive with what they were doing given the time that they dropped. These guys launched very high attack stats. They could tank very, very well. And they will probably EZA, if I had to guess, during this upcoming, the 10th anniversary. Because I'm still saying, this has been my guess for the longest time, I think we're going to get a Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta and a Super Saiyan Vegito start of turn. That is my guess for what the 10th anniversary is going to be. And then part 2 will be Kid Buu and Omega Shenron as the other headlining units, or at least that's my guess. And if that is the case, obviously we'll be seeing both of these guys EZA. With an EZA, they're going to be incredible. And again, they're very, very soon. So I would say that this is a very good pickup. Pikkon. So I've been saying this for the longest time. I think Pikkon and Janemba are actually going to EZA during this year's New Year's celebration. A lot of people still love to use Pikkon, and people still do because he has really good support if you give him a Rainbow Orb, and he has the Ghost Usher ability that you're able to use deep into these fights, and that's why a lot of people really like him. Because if you're doing a no-item run and you run Pikkon, assuming he dodges everything, you get to use an item in a no-item run. So Pikkon can certainly get some value, again, he's very risky to run, but if you get that massive payoff and you just float him for the rest of the fight thereafter, he's already effectively helping the team out a bunch. With an EZA, which again, I am expecting to show up within the next couple of months, he's just going to be that much better, because imagine if you don't have to float Pikkon, if he just has a higher chance to dodge, or he naturally gives so much more support, or maybe you can even use the Ghost Usher active skill like a turn earlier, if they would want to like finally do the update to mess around with active skill conditions. Well, they can mess with the conditions, it's just what the active skill does they can't change, excuse me. So they could make it that you're able to do the active skill on turn 1, I don't know, they could do something crazy like that, where you could pop a Ghost Usher whenever you wanted to, they just couldn't change the ability that it is a Ghost Usher. So, I don't know, Pikkon with an EZA will be very, very good. So far, there's a lot of really good, like, EZA potential on this list. Broly. Now, Broly did recently just EZA. I am probably a much bigger fan of this EZA than a lot of other people. So my stance, if you didn't see the video that I did the other day, I think Broly is just solid. He's a solid like 6 to 7 out of 10. But the thing is, like, most EZAs this year, I feel like are probably hovering in and around that position. I don't really think any EZA we've gotten this year, they're all good, but compared to, like, the LR EZAs, it's night and day. Like, this is such a year of LRs, TURs are just really struggling. If you're going up against a Pure Saiyan, Hybrid Saiyan, or Movie Hero category enemy, or if you're going up against a Goku enemy, this Broly is actually super effective. He can stack up its attack very, very easily. He's a perfect slot 2 with the brand new Broly that we got. You put him in slot 1, this guy in slot 2. You're essentially killing everything before you even have to worry about your slot 3 getting tagged by anything. And I actually really like the idea of that, of having Like, for the first time ever, it actually feels like villains are able to move so quickly that their defensive, handicaps, I guess, don't really feel like handicaps. Because, I mean, I don't even have DBS Broly, but if I had DBS Broly on one rotation, this guy in the other rotation, both slots, we had the brand new DBZ Broly in slot 1, pretty much nothing is living that, you know? You're able to 1 to 2 phase literally almost any phase in this entire game with just how quickly these guys are able to move. Now, he can certainly get caught. Like, again, I have a video that I did the other day where he was taking like 190,000 damage on Gogeta Blue's normals, which are roughly around the 1 million mark, which, like, I mean, to be fair, that's not great. But there are a lot of other situations in that video where the Broly actually did look super effective. He did really, really good damage throughout the entire fight. And during that entire video, spoilers, he never died a single time. In over 2 hours of recording, an hour-long video, he never died once. He never cost me a run. So I feel like this Broly is pretty underrated by the community, or at least a little overhated. Yes, he does have flaws. I do certainly see them. And after using them, those flaws did get amplified in my mind. But I do still think Broly is a pretty solid option on this villain team. Bojack. Bojack could, I guess, EZA during this part 2. I know that we did get confirmed Tech LR Broly. His EZA details were revealed. That'll probably be tomorrow's video. I don't actually know what the details are yet. I haven't looked at the character, so I don't know if he's a fumble or anything. I haven't checked Twitter. But if this unit were to get an EZA, this is going to be one of the bigger villain buffs that we could potentially see. He's a really good support unit. Like, transformed, he can do decent damage. I mean, just give him any sort of defensive mechanic, and he will be really good, especially with all of his links. I feel like Bojack is pretty solid. This is another unit who actually buffs both villains and superclass allies, and with how powerful Reps of Universe 7 is at the moment, this guy's EZA would actually probably be, like, generational. He stacks defense in his base form, and at any time you're able to transform into Golden Frieza, and then Golden Frieza gets damage reduction when your HP is below a certain HP threshold. So you could certainly, like, see the mind games of this character. You could stack up a bunch with all the different abilities that Reps of Universe 7 have at their disposal, or just Universal Survival Saga as a whole. He would be having so many buffs from Tech MUI. He'd be getting crit support from all the Reps of Universe 7 category allies. If you wanted to bring Jiren or Topo, you could get some of their support on the category as well. Again, this guy will be, like, generationally good. I feel like it's almost impossible to fumble with this guy. I feel like, genuinely, if they just gave him stats, they kept everything in his kit at pretty much the same, they just gave him a bunch more stats, he would be fine. Just because his kit is already that solid. So I'm actually pretty excited to see this guy with an EZA, and that could potentially happen. Actually, I don't know. Since we did just have a massive Universal Survival Saga celebration, it might be a while before we come back to it. So it may be a little while before this guy EZAs, actually. I'm not certain. But when he does EZA, he'll be very, very good. We might have to wait a little while for it, though. Gotenks has already EZA this year. I feel like everybody, if you're a common viewer of me, you know my opinions on this guy. He is, like, on paper, an incredibly solid unit. He just never chooses to perform for me personally. I go out of my way to not use Gotenks because Gotenks just always dies. It doesn't make sense. He is a 50% chance to dodge unit in base form that can go up to 60%, and then he's a 50% that can go up to a 70%, and then he's a 70% that can go up to a 90%. He has 23 dodge in his hidden potential system, and I don't think I've ever had a unit get caught as often as this guy. He does very good damage. His tanking is obviously very, very poor, but that's why he's a dodge or die unit. I understand why people like him. It's just he never chooses to perform for me, therefore I don't like him. Tech Ultimate Gohan, I feel like a lot of people overrate Tech Ultimate Gohan. He is good, don't get me wrong, but he is not the god people want to, like, pretend that he is. He cannot go into slot 1 most of the time. Let's be real. Yes, he does stack. Yes, he does debuff, and which are huge. And once he transforms under the certain conditions, he can go into slot 1, and he can double-digit tank a lot of very impressive supers. But you have to have, like, a certain game going on. You have to go super slow for him to get as many stacks as possible. His weakest turns are turn 3 and turn 5. Turn 3, because that's where he loses all the damage reduction, and he just has the guard and whatever stacks he got on his first turn. And then turn 5, for the most part, I feel like just getting the couple of stacks that he has right there, it's not enough to get his defense to a really impressive margin. Once you get to turn 7, then obviously, yes, that's where you can start cooking with him. And then once you transform with him, if he gets, like, a double or even a triple super turn, he could be in, like, the 2 million defensive range with guard, where at that point he is essentially, like, untouchable. But you have to play a very certain game, and not, that kind of limits some of the units you have to be bringing. You can't be bringing, like, some of these super powerhouses that are going to blitz through a fight if you want to use Tech Ultimate Gohan at his maximum potential. and I feel like a lot of people do tend to ignore that. However, this is a unit who is massively, massively, massively buffed by the Super Saiyan Trio, because he is on Power of Wishes. Now, granted, to get, like, the orb changing, you would have to have, like, a consistent floater on the rotation as well. Like, you'd have to be floating either a movie hero or an all-out struggle if you wanted to keep Tech Ultimate Gohan on the rotation, but you could certainly do that, because the payoff you get with this character, if you play him correctly, is massive. I just feel like, for the most part, you have to play the game very differently if you want to see this guy at his maximum potential. Again, he is still good, don't get me wrong. He's the best EZA TUR in the game, probably, but he can still certainly run into some issues. Again, this is just not the year of TURs, unfortunately. This unit right here, I feel like we're going to have to wait a while for him to EZA. Even still, this is a 2019 unit. I guess he could EZA during, like, the New Year celebration this year. I guess that is possible. But if he was going to EZA the same thing with the Tech Vegeta, I feel like it would have been during Golden Week. I don't know why they would have returned to Buu Saga so quickly. I guess they could. It's not out of the ballpark. Because technically we went from Universe 11 into the reps of Universe 7 or whatever. And then we got Jiren, which was a massive buff. So potentially we could see another Majin Buu Saga category, like, celebration in the nearby future, and this guy's EZA would be fairly good. I think he would naturally just be weaker than the Vegeta, because this guy is built very offensively with dodge, whereas the Vegeta is built very defensively with guard and damage reduction. But they will both be very, very good. This guy would be a great linking partner with Angel SSJ3 Goku. So, again, he could potentially get a lot of value. I don't know necessarily what they would do with his kit, but he could look good. 13 is just a fraud. His EZA last year wasn't even really that great on release. Like, he just stacked defense in his base form, and then once you transform, you would roughly be like 900 to like 1,000,000 defense with no real other defense mechanics. I'm not a fan of 13. I don't think he's very good. And since he just recently EZA'd, it's going to be a very long time before, you know, he super EZAs and potentially gets brought back into the meta. Sorry, I keep taking sips of my water. Oh, I gotta speed up. We are like nowhere. We're nowhere near this. I have a whole other banner that we gotta talk about. Oh goodness, I'm 20 minutes into this bitch. Alright. Bardock. Bardock was very underwhelming on release, but I feel like if we actually get a very relevant, like, low-class warrior team, Bardock will shoot through the roof. Because his base form, he launches a bunch of additionals, and he gets extra damage reduction based on the amount of low-class warriors on your team. So one of the reasons that he's so bad right now is that you can't really run low-class warriors. Once he transforms as well, he has 30% chance to dodge, crit, and damage reduction. With all the stacks that he has on top of that, he can actually be effective. But as it stands right now, he just doesn't have a home. Cooler was good when he released, but we are way past the time of that, and it's going to be a long time before he super EZAs. Zamasu, you can still get some actually pretty decent usage out of Zamasu on, like, certain super bosses setups. You have to, like, baby him a lot. You have to give him as many stacks as possible, just because having 50% damage reduction with stacking is not enough in today's meta, but he does link very well with a lot of other extreme class characters, like Fusion Zamasu obviously comes to mind, Physical Rose Goku Black. He has options, because you can also just give him big bad bosses right there. That's a huge buff to him. Again, in certain situations, this guy's still very, very solid. Name it Goku, no, not really. He was okay on release. Like, he was fine. You could run him in pretty much every single event, and, like, half the time you'd win, half the time you'd lose. It just depended on if he wanted to guard or not. But yeah, I mean, you can't get usage out of him anymore. This is like a super battle road killer, because he has the very powerful active skill, which is a guaranteed stun. But outside of that, you're really not getting any usage out of this kid, Goku. Goku Black, I mean, he was bad last year when he released. This was like a very odd hype EZA fumble. Like, most of the time, I feel like EZAs don't get fumbled the way that this guy does. This was like a generational EZA fumble. Only having stacking as his defensive mechanic, and he didn't even really stack that fast. I don't know. I mean, I love this character, but, like, I'm not going to cope for him. Cooler, again, on release was fine, but he did already EZA. It's going to be a long time before he super EZAs. You're not going to get a lot of usage out of him. This unit, again, this was like another, like, 2023 fumble. He has, like, a very high ceiling if you're able to get him to blue, but, like, you don't get to blue until turn 7 or no, it's turn 9, I think. You don't get to see this guy's potential until turn 9. He's a very orb-hungry character as well. If you're not able to consistently give him its orbs, he's not going to look nearly as impressive. I don't know, I'm just not a fan. This Broly is a decent for, like, AoE events or, like, super battle roads. Outside of that, you're really not getting any usage out of them. This guy, on release, if you could get to turn 5, and you could consistently get Buuhan, I feel like even in today's meta, Buuhan would still potentially be competitive, but, like, Buiklo, his tanking ability isn't going to be good enough. And if you got Buu tanks, even with, like, all the debuffs that Buu tanks does provide the team, I don't think they're going to be enough to get this unit to live. But if you could consistently get Buuhan, you're going to be doing enough damage to actually crush cross over the Goku and Frieza threshold, because this guy does like a bunch of supers a turn that are all near or around the 15.5 million range. He could probably actually damage the unit. But you just have to struggle through 5 turns of essentially nothing. Like, this guy's a nothing character until turn 5. And then even once you get to turn 5, if you're not above a certain HP threshold, he's a fraud. I don't really even think that people have been experimenting with him on the Majin Buu team. Which, that should tell you something. If people are choosing to run LR Super Buu over this guy, I feel like, again, Buuhan is better than Super Buu, but at least Super Buu, you have that little bit of extra cushion for the first couple of turns. This guy, like, he's just bad. This Future Gohan, he was good at the time. You have to keep him on a main rotation if you wanted to get him his damage reduction, but at this point, only having 58% damage reduction is not enough, just because of how low his stats are. Full Power Super Saiyan 4 Goku is probably the same case. Like, he was good on release, but by now, no. This Frieza, again, on release was really, really good. It's going to be a long time before they Super Easy, so probably not. Great Ape Turles, again, was good last year, but he just can't be as competitive as he was last year. We just have way too many hard-hitting bosses. This guy sucked on release. This guy, what does he have? Is it 80% damage reduction and a Scouter? He could actually potentially be okay with 80% damage reduction and the Scouter, because he would never have to eat a super, especially since he is on Super Saiyan, so he would be buffed by the trio. I would be interested to see somebody try this out. But he does have really low defense, is the only thing. Like, yeah, you have 80%. Well, to be fair, Golden Frieza has 90% damage reduction, and most of the time he tanks normals for like 4 or 5 digits. Super Vegito might actually be okay. Broly, unless he gets a Super Easy, which could theoretically still happen during this celebration, but unless he gets a Super Easy, this guy's a fraud. This guy, I would also say, is on fraud alert. It's going to be a long time for this guy Super Easy. Same with you, same with you, same with you. And then pretty much once we get here, like, these units could all Super Easy A this year. Like, this guy, there's still a chance he Super Easy A's during this celebration. There's also a chance that you Super Easy A during the celebration, because this is just, like, a movie thing. Like, I know, obviously, it's Broly-centric, but right after Bio Broly, the very next movie actually is Janemba. And you know what would be, like, so hype and draw a lot of players back into playing this game? You would give one of the most memorable units in the game a Super Easy that is generationally good. A lot of people would be naturally just drawn back to the celebration. So, again, 2 potential Super Easy A's that could happen during this celebration. 4 Super Easy A's that could happen relatively soon. But yeah. I mean, this guy could also theoretically Super Easy A sometime soon as well. But yeah, overall, there are a lot of very solid options on the Majunior banner, but let's go ahead and check out the 23rd World Tournament Goku banner and see how it stacks up. Yeah, I'm not a fan of Turles. I don't like what Turles is providing, and even with like all the different villain buffs that we've gotten over the past 2 years, he's not relevant enough to be run. Like, we have a brand new movie boss's leader, and Turles really hasn't made any guest appearances, which is really, really funny. I've always been a fan of Kale. I think Kale, like, even on release, I was probably a little bit more sour on her, but I've learned to love this character so much, especially with all the Universe 6 buffs that we've got during this year. I have tried experimenting with her in a bunch of different setups. The only issue is, even still, her team just isn't strong enough around her to protect her, because you can keep her in her base form for a long time. As long as she gets 3 supers, she does get 60% damage reduction, and then you transform, she can go into slot 1 in some certain situations. She gets 100% defense for her first 6 turns. She gets guard and an extra 150 to stats, I believe, after receiving a hit, if there's another Universe 6 category ally on the rotation. So she can be fairly tanky after you do all that, but I don't know. She's probably not good enough anymore. But I feel like maybe if we get like a hit or something, she could actually be like a solid like option 6 on the team or something along those lines. 23rd World Tournament Goku, he is still runnable, especially since we have so many different revive characters. So many good characters like AGL, MUI, SSBE, Fat Boo, still the GT duo to an extent. It's very easy to get a revive on a lot of these different teams, which means it's pretty easy to go into his God mode. However, his God mode isn't really that impressive anymore. It's like 1.2 million defense with guard. Like, cool. You're still dying to supers, my guy. He could probably tank any normal in the game, though, when fully built up, but a single super could potentially screw this guy over, but he does have the 50% chance to nullify beam supers, so potentially you could still get some usage out of this character. He does also debuff on his super attack effect, so in any of these debuffing fights, he could potentially be a very valuable asset. So, I mean, I don't know, maybe that would be value. I've seen people saying Tech Bardock has been revived. I haven't seen it. I have personally tried using Bardock one time off screen, and I don't know, even with the support that he's getting from the SSJ trio, I just don't see it. He's very reliant on his orbs, and he doesn't have really any defensive mechanic. He gets 50% attack and defense with like 1 Rainbow Key Sphere. He's super effective against all types with 2, and he gets crit with 3. Like, his damage isn't impressive. Yeah, you get the Scouter for the first 5 turns, but it's only 5 turns. Most of the time when you really need a Scouter, it's either like turn 1 up against like Cell Max, or it's deep into a fight up against like Gogeta Blue. And you're not going to get any value out of that in these longer fights. So I don't really think that Bardock is saved by any means. Path to Power of Kid Goku, I don't even think Roshi saved him. Like, yeah, he can be flooded with a bunch of support, and he's a very good support unit in of himself. The issue is, like, enemies are just hitting too hard now. It's too much of a liability to try to keep this guy safe just because he doesn't really have any true defensive mechanics. I would be interested to see, like, people trying to run him on the Roshi team, but, like, if you're running this guy, you're naturally making Roshi a little bit weaker, because, yes, Roshi gets a stack, but he's missing out on all those stats in his passive, because he's not a Peppy Gal. So, I don't know. Potentially, he would be good on the Roshi team, but I just personally don't see it. Gamma 2 was undertuned on release. Like, yes, he was one of the more impressive offensive units in the game, but he could get caught by pretty much any super in the game. So if he could get caught 2 years ago, he's definitely getting caught now. Chaddits. Yeah. Ginyu. A lot of people thought Ginyu would be saved with the introduction of the LR Ginyu Force, but even with being flooded with the amount of support on the Special Pose team or the Ginyu Force team, it just wasn't enough for this guy. He literally only stacks until you're able to transform with him, and that's when he gets the build-up dodge mechanic. But he's just too much of a liability early on into these fights. He doesn't offer enough. He's not doing enough offensively or defensively to really be relevant. This guy, I mean, he has a decent leader skill. He could theoretically EZA this upcoming year. I don't know, generic link set. Once you transform with him, he actually is relatively solid after you get hit 5 times as Gohan. I guess there is some value with him with an EZA in this upcoming future. This guy with an EZA, which could happen, again, with any time within the next couple of months, this will be generational. This will be one of the biggest buffs to villains, especially the Majin Buu team from Golden Week, because this guy can do damage right now, and that's the main struggle that team has, is not being able to do a lot of damage. They naturally move a little bit too slow. This guy, who is very reliant on defense, like, he's actually pretty solid with all the defense mechanics that he has, and he's doing a lot of damage on top of that. You give him an EZA, you buff up his stats a little bit, maybe you give him guard, maybe you give him a little bit of damage reduction for the first couple of turns or whatever, that way he can get built up with his hits, or you can activate the active skill right away, and then all of a sudden this guy is going to be cooking. Majin Vegeta. Now, Majin Vegeta, I did recently just do a showcase for him. He's extremely undertuned, even with, like, all the support that's on the Super Saiyan Trio's team. He just isn't enough right now. With an EZA, though, I mean, he has a very solidly designed kit. 50% damage reduction as long as there's a Trunks on the team and you give him 6 orbs. Potentially, if they make it get 4 orbs or something, it's a lot easier. Or buff up the amount of damage reduction he gets. Like, maybe his intro gives him 50% damage reduction, and he gets an extra 20% if you give him 6 orbs. That way, he would have 70%. He would be a very solid, like, defensive unit. He's not designed to do damage. Like, I know he gets an extra 88% attack if you're below 88% HP, but, like, he wasn't designed to do damage back then. He wouldn't be designed to do damage with an EZA, at least I would hope not. He could potentially be very, very solid with an EZA in this upcoming months. The tech androids is another one. This is like a very similar discussion to PyCon. If you're able to keep them safe deep into these fights, you just get a Ghost Usher for free, essentially. And they should be coming up at an EZA. This was like October 2021, I want to say, or like November, somewhere around there. These guys could potentially still be very, very good. They have, obviously, the beam super nullification. They do create their own orbs. However, this is an orb-hungry character, so they kind of need their own orbs, so sometimes it's risky to float them. But it's also risky to keep them on a main rotation, obviously. But with an EZA, these guys would actually crush the game just because, again, their kit is already very, very solid. It's just their stats that are undertuned by this point. This is the filler arc Gohan. This is from, like, the Garlic Jr. or whatever. I mean, he's a fine support unit. He stacks defense. Again, with an EZA, I feel like he would be pretty good. Videl. Videl already had her EZA. What is it? It's 70% chance to dodge before attacking, I think is what her passive is. And then after she receives a hit, she gets defense for the turn. I mean, she's fine, like, on the Roshi team. It's very scary to put a unit like this. Like, I would much rather have, like, AGL MUI or Tech MUI in slot 1 over a unit like this, because I think that they would probably be able to tank a little bit better. But she does very solid damage. Like, she obviously stacks attacks, so She does have like a place on her own team, but a little bit of a scary one. These guys, I think they're just going to EZA during part 2, so potentially this will be like the most modern EZA on this entire list, so we'll just have to see. Like I said, with the Super Saiyan GT Goku, this guy with an EZA in the next couple of months, I would expect probably during the 10th anniversary, they will be generational. This guy is the more defensive counterpart to the Goku who is more offensive, so I think that this guy would probably be a little bit better with an EZA, just because defense is a little bit more key, but I guess we will see. Janemba, I do think that he will EZA during this New Year celebration, and I do personally prefer Janemba a little bit more. You give him 4 orbs, 2 of which are rainbow. He's giving a bunch of support to the entire team. He's a fantastic support unit. Right now, he just has guard as his defensive mechanic, but even in some certain situations, like if you can still run him as a floater, as long as slot 3 isn't being bullied, and you can actually help out a bunch of different villain teams. So I'm actually very excited to see what Janemba does. I feel like he's a very good pickup. This guy is probably going to EZA very, very soon. Again, this will be like a generational EZA. He's incredibly powerful. He has a bunch of different things that he does in his kit. He has the counter. He has the active skill, which makes him like incredibly powerful for the 1 turn. I think he gets 48% attack and defense and 6 ki for 1 turn or something like that. It's crazy. Very, very good. Exchange is probably the second best EZA TUR in the game, especially if you have the Boo Saga Extreme class team. Very, very solid. Kefla is my darling. I love her so much. She's probably my favorite EZA to run. Just because even though she has a naturally lower chance to dodge and she's a very orb-hungry character, she stacks up incredibly fast. She does an insane amount of damage. She can actually get usage out of her active skill right now in the current meta, which is changing physical orbs to STR orbs when she's in her Super Saiyan 2 form. I just love her. She literally never lets me down. Post super, she can tank almost any normal in the game. She obviously can't tank supers at any point just because she only stacks attack. She does not stack defense anywhere in her passive. I'm a big fan of Kefla. Beerus. I mean, Beerus was good last year, but his time in the sun is over, I think. This is the unit, again, he'll probably EZA very, very soon. He will be generational because he has guard and damage reduction built into his passive as long as you give him a certain amount of orbs. Very, very solid. Future Gohan, actually, just like his stocks went through the roof now that we have the Super Saiyan Trio. I saw a clip of him the other day on Twitter where he ate Goku and Frieza's super attack for like 145,000 or something. Like, insane level tanking. Because he stacks defense in his base form. Once he transforms, he stacks attack. He has guard in his base form, and then he gets 59% damage reduction once he's Super Saiyan. I think it's his defense mechanic. I'm not entirely certain, but I believe it's something along those lines. So if you link this guy with, like, Tech Ultimate Gohan, and you have the support from all, like, the Super Saiyan trios, as well as having stuff like All in the Family and Brainiacs being activated, I think that's an extra 45% defense. That's a very competitive rotation that, like, I would love to experiment with myself. This guy's a fraud. This guy you could actually still run on a lot of different Reps of Universe 7 teams just because of how much support is being around. His active skill is probably still one of the more devastating active skills in the game just because of how high his attack ceiling can get. Because he gets an extra 59% attack and defense after he's been hit a couple of times. He greatly stacks his attack, and then I do think that, like, the Universal Super Spirit Bomb is probably one of the more devastating attacks that you can do, especially if it does crit. So I actually do fairly still like this guy in, like, shorter events. This guy, I wasn't a fan of him last year. I'm not going to be a fan of him now. You can still run Gogeta. I mean, 50% chance to dodge in his base form, 70% chance to dodge in his secondary form once he's blue, and he gets guaranteed crits once you transform. He's not going to be crossing any damage thresholds, but if you need just a slot 6 unit, you could run Gogeta still. Hit with an EZA, or no, he already EZA'd. With a Super EZA, he would be good, but, I mean, right now, he's just like a stunner sealer. He has very low stats. You can't really run him. This guy, I feel like his time in the sun is certainly up. I mean, MVP 17 is one of these units who, like, depending on the units around him, his stocks go up, they go down, they go up, they go down. I guess you could run him on the Reps of Universe 7 team. He does give defensive support. He does have built-in damage reduction. You get him up to 54% damage reduction, I think it's what he is, because he has 17% at the start of turn. And if you drop below 77% HP, he gets all that extra damage reduction. I guess he could still be fine as a slot 6, but I don't know why you would run him over, like, Team Universe 7, 17 and Golden Frieza, so on and so forth. This Goku, again, his time in the sun is over. Bardock, Super Saiyan 3 Bardock, he had a very underwhelming EZA on release. I don't see him being saved anytime soon. We're not even going to talk about you. You were the same thing with, like, Rose, very bad on release. I would say bad on release. Again, you EZA'd several years ago. I don't really see people getting a lot of value out of you. And then now we're into, like, Super EZA territory. So, obviously, this is, like, one of the better Super EZAs in the game. I think your Super EZA is just, like, fine. People love talking about this guy, saying that he's either great or he's bad. I think he's just okay. I think he's somewhere in the middle. Goku Black is very good, like, on villain setups as well. And then if we're looking for, like, super easy A's, I don't really think any of these units could super easy A during, like, this celebration specifically. Yeah, I don't, yeah. But, like, except for Gogeta, because if they, obviously, if they easy A Janemba, they would super easy A Gogeta. And Gogeta would actually be on the 200% of the brand new trio, so that could also be, like, some stocks right there. So, overall, there are a lot of options that are either still decent in today's meta, or could easy A soon. So if I had to say, which one would I recommend summoning on, assuming you're not trying to just fill out your box? Where do I think most of the value is? I don't know. Because, see, this is a little bit trickier than I thought. Probably the Majunior banner. Yeah. Yeah, I would say probably the Majunior banner. Because looking at this one, like, yes, I would say you could probably still run 23rd World Tournament Goku. And then you can't really, you can run Videl, you can run Kefla, you can run Fat Boo. You could run Gohan. I mean, I guess you could run him, but I don't really want to say that. And then there's potential for one super easy A that I could see happening soon. I guess two. But, like, they would super easy A the other Broly before you got yours. And now if you look at this one, like, I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, I guess? 8 with an asterisk. And then we have several super easy A's that could happen on the bottom. I feel like that's one of the big disadvantages of this banner, is that so many of these units have super easy A. There's 3 super easy A's already on this banner, which would be like, yes, this is like immediate value. You can immediately get these guys. But like, all of these guys will super easy A soon. And you have this super easy A right here. This is the best super easy A of the bunch. I mean, 83% chance to dodge with 50% damage reduction if you give him the right conditions. Like, he's better than anything that these guys are doing, just because he's more self-reliant. I would say, if I had to guess, if you didn't know which one to summon for, and you're not just going for collection purposes, if you're going for immediate value or value in the future, I would say vote for Majunior. Because you're getting, like, I mean, this guy, again, he's a perfect dodge or die unit. You could run this guy with the trio. This guy can still be good in slot 1 or slot 2 under certain situations. This is one of the most popular units of all time just because of his Ghost Usher ability, and will be easying a lot sooner than the tech androids. This guy right now is pretty solid. This guy right now is pretty solid, pretty solid. This guy will be generational when he easy A's. If we get low-class warriors, you could get, like, a lot of stocks. Yeah. Alright, so I'm going to say, if you don't know who to vote for, and again, you're not only summoning not to, like, add collection or add power level, if you just want value with units you could potentially get right now, or units who could potentially easy A or super easy A in the nearby future, I'm talking within, like, the next 6 months, I would say go Majunior. I'm not going to say you're crazy if you go for 23rd World Tournament Goku, however, because, again, most of these are, like, dual Dokkan Fest-esque characters, so, like, they have counterparts that are very solid. Like, obviously, the counterpart on this one is Majin Vegeta. But I feel like just with everything, take it into account. This wasn't an easy choice, so I don't think either decision is inherently wrong. Like, when I summoned, I personally summoned for this one. When I did my summons. I still have more stones that I can use to get more tickets. I'm just going to wait a little bit. That's what I'd also recommend. I probably should have said this at the start, but most of the time I do recommend waiting to, like, spend red coins or purple coins or red stones, whatever we get, memorial stones. I generally like to wait until the end of a celebration. That way I can see what units have super easy aid, what units have easy aid, because sometimes the value could change. Like, right now, my opinion would completely change if out of nowhere they're like, oh yeah, by the way, this unit's going to easy A, this unit's going to easy A, and this unit's going to easy A, all within this celebration. Well, then all of a sudden, this banner has way more value than the other one, you know what I mean? Or if there's, like, a dual easy A, like Majin Vegeta and the Super Saiyan 2 Goku, they both easy A at the same time, but this guy's easy A is just 1,000 times better and they fumbled the other one, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, now I want to summon for this one, but I can't because I wasted my tickets already. So, generally, I like to wait. And that's also why this video is coming out a little bit later into the celebration. Again, like, part 2 announcements just happened last night. I believe there's, like, a live stream happening on the 11th. I'll definitely be trying to live stream that if I can. That's just, yeah. I hope this video was helpful. I gotta really quickly edit this because this has got to go up in 2.5 hours. I'm very far behind. I had a very busy day yesterday, but we're gonna wrap that up here. Again, I don't think you're crazy if you summon for both. Again, I would probably hold on to everything that you have just until we get a little bit deeper into the celebration, because these banners are up for another month. So you still have a month to make your final decision. So that's another 30 days that the power level of these banners could wildly change. Again, new EZAs could be announced, or we could get new difficult content that, like earlier I said, you could probably still run 23rd World Tournament Goku. We might get a new fight that just makes 23rd World Tournament Goku look like a fish, and he's completely unrunnable. That could happen. You never know. You never know. There's plenty of, like, I know 30 days doesn't sound like a lot, but with how, like, dry Part 1 was, Part 2 is probably going to be flooded with a lot more stuff for us to do. So I would imagine we're going to get a lot of new difficult events. We're going to get maybe some, like, new free-to-play events. Hopefully we'll get, like, some link leveling keys, or, like, a guaranteed link level stage, like the Guru event, or a meet event, something. Something that we can grind. You never know. But that is going to be all for this time, guys. Let me know, which banner are you summoning for? Do you agree with everything I had to say, or do you disagree? I don't know. Let me know in the comment section down below. But that's going to be all for this time, guys. I've been the Super27. I'm a variety Twitch streamer and an up-and-coming PNG YouTuber trying to make it big in the world. I have a Twitter, a Twitch, a TikTok, and a YouTube, the links to which can all be found in the description of this video. And while you're down there, don't forget to like, subscribe, share me around, and leave me a comment, positive, negative, or indifferent. I would love just any sort of interaction I can get from you all. But that's going to be all for now. So, as always, I've been the Super27, and I am signing off.